Hey, you guys, welcome back to day 4 of the Traditional Skills Summit. I'm your host, Josh Thomas, one of the founders of the School of Traditional Skills. Excited to be here with you today. Excited to be having my personal friend, Caroline's personal friend, Melissa K. Norris, on with us today, who's also had a hand in founding the school and the Modern Homesteading Conference, and just a 5-generation homesteader herself, and super neat lady. So really looking forward to hanging out with her today. So glad all of you are here. Wow, look at the comments. There's already like 600 comments in here. You guys are on it. Let's see, where's everybody from today? Kentucky, Idaho. Good morning, Sherry. Let's see, Georgia, New Brunswick, more Idaho. All right. I'm just scrolling. Ohio, Florida, Texas, Georgia. I'm looking for Montana. I don't know what states I haven't seen yet. I don't know. I feel like I've been seeing them all. You guys are here from all over the country. I know we've got places from all over the world. And we're just so thankful to have you guys here today. Wyoming, there we go. Hey, our director of content who makes sure these quality classes get out to you guys is from Wyoming. Her name is Carly, and she's the one that makes sure, she's actually the one that's guiding this whole summit here and producing it for us and making it all happen. So give a shout out to Carly, because she, along with all of our team, there's so many people, but Carly's been a key factor in making this happen there in Wyoming. So thank you, Carly. And good morning. All right. Good to see you all here. Let's see, what housekeeping do we need to do? Did you catch the roundtable last night? That sure was a lot of fun with Adam and Noah and Sean and Beth. Of course, if you didn't or you missed anything else, you can catch the replay. Link is in your email this morning with all the replays of the summit. We got them for you on one page. Super easy to find, super easy to go back and check out. But of course, there's nothing like being here live, getting the chance to answer your questions, being a part of the conversation, and having the opportunity to win something. We've got more giveaways today, of course. We're giving away tickets to the Modern Homesteading Conference, some hats, some books. I think we're doing some fencing later this evening. More of the Homesteading Living magazine. Excuse me. Lots of good stuff. Let's kick it off with an STS hat. Of course, I don't have mine on because I didn't want you to have to be looking at duplicates. But you can't buy these hats. We've gotten a lot of requests for them. So we thought it'd be fun to give some away this week. And it looks like the winner is Ann Worrell. Ann Worrell, you have won a School of Traditional Skills hat. Hope you enjoy that. Make sure and email in at hello. There you go. Hello at schooltraditionalskills.com. And we will get that mailed out to you probably today. The team is on it. So thank you, Mariah, for making sure all of these winners are getting their gifts out as quickly as possible. Before we get going with Melissa, I do need to give a shout out to our sponsors. We've had some wonderful sponsors this week, and the whole day today is sponsored by Genesis Gold Group. So today's session is brought to you by Genesis Gold, as is all of the day's sessions. Now, you know, Genesis Gold Group, that might seem a little bit different to you, a Gold Group sponsoring, but you know, we're about traditional assets as well. And gold and silver are assets that carry people through hard times. Now, Genesis Gold Group believes in empowering faith-driven stewardship with gold and silver, and it's an integral part of a balanced portfolio. Protecting your finances with precious metals has never been more crucial during these uncertain times. I fully agree. I've always been a big believer of holding some physical gold and silver. Genesis Gold has a whole lot of options. They're a great, trustworthy group, and they're going to be presenting today between session 2 and 3. Highly encourage you to check that out. And hey, Dean Cain, for those of you who know who Dean Cain is, he was played Superman in the 80s and 90s, I think. And he's a homesteader like a lot of us, and he's going to be there sharing with Jonathan, who is the CEO there at Genesis Gold Group. But really encourage you to check that out. And thank you, Genesis. Thanks for your support of this event and helping make it happen. All right. Let's move on here. Melissa K. Norris helps hundreds of thousands of people each month to raise their own food and to create a homemade, homegrown kitchen, home, garden, and barnyard through her website, podcasts, and books. She's the co-founder of Homestead Living, which inspires people to take greater control of their life, food, health, and land. This year, School of Traditional Skills partnered with Melissa at her brand new Modern Homestead Conference. And it was an amazing time, you guys. We finally have got a live homesteading conference on the Western United States. You guys in the East, you've had Homesteaders of America. You've had a lot of things going on for a long time. We just haven't had something out here like this. I'm so thankful for Melissa and her friend Katie, who organized this, put it on. We got to partner with them and help make it happen. And it was an amazing event. That's why we're excited to be giving some tickets away for that and hope that you can come wherever you are in the United States. Melissa is also one of the original brainstormers and contributors to getting School of Traditional Skills off the ground as well. So we've been thankful for her participation in helping us early on in getting this going. Now, Melissa lives with her husband. Thank you. Lives with her husband and 2 kids in their own little house in the big woods in the foothills of the North Cascade Mountains. That's in the Pacific Northwest up there in Western Washington. Beautiful, beautiful place. We've been out there a couple times, Carol and I have. And she's a 5th generation homesteader who has got deep, deep roots, deep knowledge, and she loves to share her life and her extensive knowledge with others. So we're thankful that she's here with us today to tell you and to share with you what you should be doing right now to extend your garden season, both next spring and next fall. As I said, Melissa's not only an instructor here at the school and just an amazing homesteader and teacher, she's also a good friend of Carolyn and I, and happy to have her here. Melissa, welcome. Where are you at?
Hey,
there
you
go.
I am. Hey, Josh. Well, thanks. I'm super excited to be here. It's so fun seeing everybody coming in to learn. And there's just something about the energy when you've got that many like-minded people together, even in a digital capacity. So I'm excited for today.
Oh, it is. Me too. It has been such a great week. We've had so many neat conversations. Of course, we had Carolyn yesterday. That was a big session, a lot of fun. And Shannon Hayes, who's a new instructor. And I don't know if you know Shannon, but so that was an amazing session. She was a lot of fun. And if you didn't get to check that out, I think you would really, really like it.
Well, I'll have to go watch the replay. I'm glad you have replays. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's been real good. What's going on with you and your homestead? What's boots on the ground before we get into gardening here? What's boots on the ground for you right now in the Western Cascades there on your homestead?
Yeah. Well, I think probably like most people, at least if you have a more northern or shorter growing season, it is just massive harvest time right now. September is actually a busier harvest month for us than August is.
Yeah.
And so I had 2 lots full of ripe tomatoes. I sillily thought that I could just put them in like a little gathering basket, went out and had to come back in and grab laundry baskets to get them all. And so still have massive amounts of tomatoes coming in, which is lovely. But we are actually butchering chickens today. In fact, it's kind of funny. If you see my eye go, it's because my husband is carrying all of the stuff to start butchering. I told him, I'm like, I'm going to be teaching. I can't help you until later today. And so he's solo starting it this morning. But we're doing all of our meat birds. So we're doing 60 meat birds today, and that's for our family. So that's getting done. We harvested our beef last weekend. So it's just all kinds of harvest coming on. I don't know about you guys, Josh, but we've raised meat birds different time periods and kind of tested and played with that. But we found for us, it's best if we actually get them in like midsummer and then butcher them right about this time of year, both for like they're not as affected when they're little by any of those weird hot days, but it's also warm enough that I don't tend to lose any, where even with heat lamps and plates and all of those things, I've tried them much earlier in the spring and I always end up losing more just because it's so cold out. But the benefit is the extra stuff from the garden, especially those like, the zucchinis that you swear you harvest every day. And then you go out and there's one that's like a baseball bat and you're like, it wasn't here yesterday. And so But the meat birds love those. Like they go crazy for all the extra vegetables and the apples that have just gotten too bruised or too damaged. And so I found like it cuts down on our feed bill as well. So, anyways, we're doing meat birds, but this is the time of year we've kind of landed on is the best time for us to bring those in. So it's just like a harvest palooza right now. The freeze dryer is going right in the other room. It's on the other side of the wall here, which is why I'm using my mic and headphones so that you don't hear it going. Yeah, so it's all really good things. It's just a very busy time of year, filling the freezers and the pantry and the canning jars and all those fun things.
Oh man, it is. Yeah, we do about the same for personal. We're having to extend the season now because Connor, my son, is starting to raise birds to sell. So we're having to dip into that earlier spring, but we're just like you. For our environment, we like starting them in midsummer and harvesting right about now. In fact, we did 100 on Saturday, and everybody tomorrow while the conference is happening. They're nice enough to be getting it done before I come home and giving me a little bit of a break. They're doing another 100 on Friday. So yeah, it's time to get that stuff in. What do you do when you have so many tomatoes coming in at once? How do you handle that? That can be, and the thing is it's a whole lot of tomatoes, but tomatoes don't keep very long, and it's a whole lot of other things coming in at once. So what do you do with your tomatoes when you've got that many coming in at one time?
Yeah, that's a great question. If they're completely ripe, like, they're just full red ripe, then you're right. You've really only got about 3 to 4 days before they're going to start breaking down and things are going to go. So this time of year, when I have that mass amount coming on, it's going to be preserving them in whatever fashion with really in a 2 to 3 day period. So for me, as I look at what do I still have on the shelf? So actually I have a lot of salsa still left from last year, but we ran out of tomato sauce last month. And so I am putting those through the food mill. I have one of the Weston Price mills, and I'm just putting them through that and cooking it all down into sauce and just canning it. Whereas last year I had more sauce and I didn't have as much salsa. So I kind of look at our cooking habits and where we're at. And it kind of varies a little bit each year, just depending on what I put up the year before and what we've done. In the beginning or the end of the season, when I don't really have enough tomatoes that I find it worth, getting the kitchen a mess and dragging everything out for, I tend to just throw them in the freezer. So if it's just like a few gallons worth, I throw them in the freezer until I have, for me, it's kind of a minimum of about 10 gallons worth of tomatoes before I'm going to process and do a big batch of sauce or something like that. So I'll throw them in the freezer at the first part of the year. But right now it's really just, and sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 days to get through that many. Only have so many big pots and you're simmering down for all that type of stuff. But I just kind of know, like I'll be doing another picking actually tomorrow. And so I know Sunday after church, it's tomato preserving day all day long. So it's going to be making sauce. I may throw some in the freeze dryer if I don't have the freeze dryer full with some other things, but I've got so much coming in. And so I probably will be putting the celery. I've got a lot of celery coming on in the freeze dryer and just doing a whole nother round of sauce. So I just do it as a marathon day usually.
Nice. And I know we're going to jump into gardening here in a moment, but this is kind of a fun theme here because it is harvest season and so many people are, wrestle with that every year. And so I'm going to go out here, a little broader perspective, a mindset for you in managing all of it, not just tomatoes, but like it's all coming in. You got tomatoes, you got to get them done before they go bad. Apples are probably starting to come in, celery, you got to butcher chickens. What are some mindsets that you have to kind of walk in or apply this time of year to help keep sanity and get everything done and try not to waste anything? We hate, we all hate seeing things go bad, but sometimes it's just like overwhelming how much is coming in. So
yeah.
how do you handle that?
That's a great thing. One is knowing the season. I know September is crunch mode for preserving. Like I know it's going to be busy. So preparing myself ahead of time and just knowing that is the season of September for us, just with our growing season. And so, we can push ourselves to do hard things and to do more physically than is what our norm when we know it's for a short period of time. So I know that I might have to, get up earlier in order to find the time to do some of the extra preserving, or I'm going to set some other things aside. So I am not dealing with my sourdough starter right now. I'm not trying to bake bread while I'm doing this. That is resting in the fridge at the moment. The other thing is, I know Carolyn talked about this yesterday, and Shannon might have, I didn't get to catch that one, but I saw the title is, for me, it used to be a lot of times, and still sometimes, depending on how much we're doing in a day, you spend all of this time preserving this food so that you and your family have really, clean food, exactly what's in it, what's not in it, how it was raised, if you're raising it yourself, and preserving it so you can eat really good. And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, I just worked myself, and now, like, where's the phone in pizza, or where, like, you go get fast food because you're so tired. And there's no shame in doing that. So if you do that, and I still have a few times I do that, but now I've started looking at, okay, I've got all of these tomatoes coming in, so I'm going to put something in the slow cooker that will be ready for tonight at dinner, because I know I'm going to be too tired to cook at dinner time, and the kitchen's going to be, a mess still from everything being out. So I try to set it up so that dinner is ready and already going in the morning before I get started, and then move into it. And prioritizing as well. So like with the apples will keep for a while. And so, those I don't have to worry about processing as soon as they come in. They're going to be fine in some bins or some boxes and sitting for at least a week or two, sometimes longer, depending upon the storage variety and if they don't have bruises, et cetera, coming in, and where you're storing them. So I'll set those to the side and know that I'm going to get to those later. The tomatoes aren't going to last that long. Obviously the chickens, once they've been butchered, you've got about a 2-day rest period in the fridge, and then they either need to be canned or freeze dried or put in the deep freezer. So those, knowing how to prioritize what's going to hold for you and what's not. Now, when you do have tomatoes coming in, if you've got some that are just orange, then those will probably hold for a week. They will ripen, but it's going to be slower. But if they're fully ripe when they come in, they have to be dealt with right away. Like if we've got some late autumn bearing raspberries that are coming on. And so as I pick those, I just put those in the freezer. Those are fine for me to turn into jam or to jelly later when I don't have, time to deal with them right now. So I just put those in the freezer. So kind of looking at, what is it you're going to be doing with them? How are you going to be preserving them? So if you're making jam or jelly, freeze those berries. They're actually going to juice much easier for you once they thaw. If you're going the jelly route, so you're doing yourself a favor. Whereas if I have green beans coming in, I want to get those canned right away from fresh. I don't want to freeze them, then thaw them so they're mushy, and then can them, because they're just going to be really mushy end product. It's not going to be desirable. So kind of filter through what you have to do right now, prioritize that, and then you can set the rest off and deal with that a little bit further down the road. But again, you just know that you're going to be putting in a lot of work this month, but your family is going to eat off of that food for an entire year. So it's totally worth it to be a little bit busy and a little bit tired right now for this month, but you reap those benefits for the whole following year. So it's just worth it.
Those are some great tips and great thoughts. Do pigs fit into any of this time of year for you?
I love that. So full confession, we decided not to do pigs this year. We were going to do them, but we looked at everything that we had on our plate. And I think this is important for homesteaders, even seasoned homesteaders, as we looked at everything that we had on our plate that we were doing this year. And we made the decision. We had enough meat from our other sources that we decided not to do pigs this year. It was going to add too much onto already really full plates, because this is for the long haul. Yeah. And so we're going to do pigs next year, but we decided to take them off the table literally this year, and we didn't raise them this year.
Interesting. See, they're the cleanup crew for us when we're overwhelmed with harvesting or we just have too much. We have a type of crabapple tree that produces prolifically along with the zucchinis and different things. And I can't remember if it was Carolyn or one of the older girls, was lamenting these buckets of apples that we just weren't getting to. Carolyn's already canned way more than she needs of certain things. And I was like, and they were complaining about them getting wasted. I was like, oh no, they're not getting wasted. They're putting fat on the pig. And so that's like our forgiveness right there for everything coming in, is being able to just put a lot of that through the pigs and finish the pigs off in the fall here.
Yeah. Well, the apples, our cows love the apples. So we'll take the apples down to the cattle and the meat birds, even though they're being butchered. But even our hens, which we keep that flock year round, they'll eat the apples and they'll eat the zucchini. As long as I slice the zucchini open so they can see the seeds, mean, the chickens will go through any large zucchini. I mean, and chickens will even
Nice.
eat meat scraps too. I mean, they
Yeah.
are
Oh, yeah.
omnivores as well. So I kind
Yep.
of am using the chickens right now, as long as I
Right.
don't have too much, obviously, for them. But we've got
Right.
92 poultry on the homestead right now. So soon to be much
92 egg
less. Yeah.
layers.
Yeah. Well, with the ducks and the egg layers and then the meat birds as well.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
it's about to come down. But with 92 poultry, any
Yeah.
excess I've had, they've taken care of.
They'll clean it up. That
Yeah.
is good. Well, with all of this, we still need to plan for next year's garden, right?
Amen. Yeah.
And we still need to be giving some thought to that and some mindset. So that just wanted to use that to lead into this year-round mindset. Talk to us about what we need to be thinking about here related to the garden, even though we're deep in preserving season.
Yeah, I'm excited. Sorry, Josh, my internet. Can you
No, you're good. You're sounding good. Yeah,
Okay.
we were just leading in to talk about that year-round mindset and what you do in the garden right now, how it will improve next year, to help people start thinking as they're, where they're at right now, getting ready for next year.
Yeah. Well, really, a lot of times we think of the fall as the end of the gardening season. And if you've had a big gardening season or it's your first year, a lot of times you kind of have that almost like sigh of relief. Like you love the garden and all of that, but you're kind of ready to have a little bit of a break. You kind of look forward to the fall and a little bit of those off months. Maybe not necessarily the loss of the fresh vegetables coming in, but definitely lessens the workload. But fall is actually one of the most critical times to improving all of your gardening for next year. So not only your garden planning, because that definitely comes into play. And a lot of people save that for January or sometimes even spring, depending on where your planting dates fall as far as what your climate is. But really, fall is the best time, in my opinion, to really get a jump start on improving your soil health, because there's a lot that you can do and set yourself up in fall that doesn't have as much hands-on once it's done. The winter months and the spring months are going to carry through and do a lot of the work for you as into building that soil. You just kind of have to set it up in the fall. And so then you go through, all the fallow months of the winter, and then you come into spring and you've just set yourself up for massive soil improvements. You're planning stuff, everything, and then you can really hit the ground running. You can get stuff in sooner if you've done planning. And so I just find that I do all of it right after, as the garden is coming off. The summer, as we get those first frosts, that's where I really start implementing everything for the following year. And I used to do it in the spring and sometimes you'd hit May because we don't plant till Memorial Weekend. And I would wait until May and be like, oh, what are we going to do in the garden this year? And then it just kind of makes May really hectic. You just don't get ahead. And so I found it's much better if you do it now while it's fresh, especially if you've been gardening for a while. The years, I'm sure it's showing my age here, but they start to kind of blend together. And so if I wait even until January, sometimes I can be like, oh man, if I didn't take very good records, like really trying to remember, like, oh, was that last year? Or was it in this spot that didn't do well? So I find if you do it right now while everything is fresh, you're just going to be much better off.
Yeah, I'm really hearing you talk about intentionality and, kind of forward thinking. And that's been a bit of a theme that's come up here and there, being really intentional where you're at right now. So you're harvesting a bed, you're actually thinking there, even if you're not taking action yet. It sounds like you're thinking about, what do I need to do to this bed later this fall to get it ready for spring? Maybe. Is that kind of how that works for you?
Yeah, exactly. So right now we're in a drought period. I know it sounds funny because I live in the Pacific Northwest and normally people think of us being really wet. We get about 78 inches of rainfall a year on average, which is a decent amount. However, we haven't really had any significant rainfall since May. And so we're really, really dry right now. There's not any in immediate danger to us, but there's some wildfires about 40 miles from us, etc. And so I'm really noticing that certain beds of the garden and certain areas in the vegetable garden are holding moisture much better than others. And so I'm not having to water those ones as much. Different ones are, they're drying out much faster, etc. And so I'm looking at that right now so that I can get in more carbon to those areas of the garden that aren't holding as much moisture retention right now, so that I can build that up in the soil, assuming that next summer is going to be very similar and the same. We always have kind of not much rain July through August, but this past year it actually started in May. And that's kind of been the trend. The past 3 summers we've had, they've been drier for longer periods of time. We're still having our average rainfall. It's just in a more condensed period. And so I'm really looking at trying to get a lot more carbon into our soil. One, so that the moisture retention is there during those dry months. But two, because we're getting more concentrated amounts of rain in shorter periods, that carbon can soak up that moisture, and I don't have as much erosion, standing water, etc. All of those things. And both of those things are actually solved by carbon. So I'm really evaluating, okay, which beds and which spots on the property really need this. And so I can put my attention there on those specific spots. So that's kind of one example that I've really been eyeing even right now, just as a watering issue.
Yeah. And you hear that more and more. I don't know. You hear more how much there's more fluctuations of weather. I think the weather has always maybe fluctuated more than we tend to think it has. We want to remember that there's just this normal. And the more I talk to people in my travels and everything, and people that have been in certain areas for a long time, that seems to be normal. But either way, it's a reality that we got to work with. And since you brought this out a little bit about carbon, love to hear your strategies. What are you doing to help mitigate the fluctuations, using carbon? Like, what are some of your strategies?
Yeah. Well, looking at the resources we have first, that I don't have to purchase from an outside source. So do I have some old hay that is, that we didn't feed last year, that's not really no longer prime, it doesn't have nutrition, etc., that I can use? And we have a few old bales that I can do that with, not an excessive amount, but enough for one garden bed. So I'm looking at that. We have wood chips. So my husband works at a sawmill. I have a brother who clears land and has a wood chipper. So I have access to wood chips pretty readily. So wood chips is another one of those. Straw would be another option, but pretty soon here, we're going to have a lot of leaves falling off of the maple trees around here. And so I will be gathering up all of the leaves from neighbors' trees and the few that we have, etc., and bringing those in too. So it's another reason for fall, as far as getting your garden soil built up. And especially as we're talking about carbon and even composting, you have more readily things naturally available because of the leaf fall, etc. I feel like that you can get. So my main part for the vegetable garden and those beds, those are the carbon sources that I'm going to be bringing in, and just doing layered composting and layered mulching. But also looking, I know we're talking about gardening, but looking in the pasture, I'm actually looking at some cover crops to put into the pasture that will help to add more carbon too. So that's something I'm researching, but kind of extending it out to cover the whole homestead. So primarily hay, leaves, and wood chips.
Yeah, that rings right into our session with Noah, who was talking about strategies for having compost all year. And one of those ideas was stockpiling your materials, kind of exactly what you're talking about here. Is it's fall time. It's a good time to stock up on materials, and you're spreading some of them, but I imagine you're probably either starting compost piles or stockpiling some of this to build your compost when you're ready.
Yeah, it's a combination of both. We actually have some really big piles of wood chips because we got them earlier in the summer, and I've just been waiting to do some compost with those, and then some we already spread on the bed. So, yeah.
Yeah. Very, very cool. What are you thinking about experimenting with in the pasture? Of course, I love being in the pasture, probably more than I love gardening. And since you brought it out, what are you thinking about to your pasture?
Yeah, well, I've been trying to be much more observant, which sounds funny, but very much observant, and really watching the pasture this year. And what I have found really interesting is we have a area where we had put quite a bit of, and they weren't even green wood chips. They were literally more like sawdust chips for my husband's sawmill, just the off part. So there was no green material. And we had them in a pile next to one of the run out sheds where we would let the cows go in the wintertime. And we hadn't gotten it all put in there. And so it's just kind of like in this little pile. But what's fascinating is I can see it right outside my window. About 20 feet out from this sawdust pile, and where we kind of had been, putting sawdust in and out. So there's a layer there of just basically sawdust. That has grass and clover that is like 8 to 10 inches tall and has stayed green. And then as soon as you get out from about that 20-foot mark, I mean, it is just brown dead, nothing.
Hmm.
And so it's fascinating. And then where we fed we feed big round bales. So we feed haylage, which is fermented hay, and the big, huge round bales. And so where we had fed those, you can see, because they'll leave, they waste some, they're cows. They waste some and they leave some on the ground. And so those areas where we fed these big round circles, it's the same thing, but it's because there's extra carbon. So it doesn't seem to matter if it's the sawdust or if it's the hay. There's this excess carbon in that area, but everything has stayed very green because it's retained the water. So I'm contemplating just taking those wood chips, because we have so much available for my husband's work, which are the sawdust chips. Those I don't put on the garden anymore because there's no green material in there to help feed the garden soil.
Mhm.
But on the pasture, we've got plenty of manure happening. So I'm not really worried about that, whereas the cows aren't pooping in the garden. So I'm going to do, I think, about 2 inches, not too thick, but about 2 inches, and just spread it all across the top section of one of our fields as a test plot with just the sawdust, and see what happens with them just feeding on it over the winter by just adding that extra carbon. And then I'm going to be looking at some of the different cover crops, but I have to see what are going to actually grow in the fall here. With our low sunlight hours as we move into
Yeah.
fall and winter, as well as the cooler temps, as far as cover crops. So that one I haven't nailed down as much. Of course, the clovers are great at helping to fix nitrogen into the soil, but they're not as heavy as a carbon crop. But like daikon radish, some of those things that would,
Mhm.
really get down in at the soil level. And then
Yeah.
once you top them, then they're going to decompose and add to it. So I'm kind of looking at some of those, but I don't feel like I've decided enough to really say like, oh yeah, this is the one to try, because I'm still determining that.
Well, it's part of the journey, right? Even folks like you and I, and you come from a long line of homesteaders, and yet we're still learning, still experimenting, still trying things, and that's ultimately how you learn and you move forward. And so it's a fun discussion, and I know we're trailing around the garden a little bit, but it's a nice holistic picture because all these things are happening in people's minds and on their homesteads. With that, though, let's come back to the garden and tell us about how you make decisions about what you need to grow, the next year, as
Yeah.
you're thinking now about what's coming.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do is I try to look at everything that I've just had coming off, or that is coming off. And for the next year, looking at, did this grow well? So for an example of this is actually, we've been talking a lot about tomatoes. So I'm going to use that as a prime example. So for years, I could not grow tomatoes. I would grow like 5 or 6 plants, and they would start out as the little starts, and they did wonderful and awesome. But then as we hit the summer months, blight would come in, or I would try growing them in buckets so that I could keep them under cover, because we used to have a lot more overhead rain during our summer months, 20 some years ago when I first started trying to grow tomatoes. And so I would get really frustrated because I would move them in their buckets so they wouldn't get hit by rain, so I wouldn't get blight. But then I would only get like maybe 3 or 4 tomatoes per plant. And I'm like, this is way too much work for like no reward.
Mhm.
And so I honestly I got mad. Sometimes I have a temper. I got mad and I'm like, I'm not growing tomatoes.
Hard to
But then
imagine you mad, Melissa.
then I got stubborn, and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. You can figure out how to grow tomatoes. People have been growing tomatoes forever. You can figure this out. So I dove into assessing, what do tomatoes actually need in order to produce a good crop? And this is what you need to look. So if you've got plants that you're trying to grow and they're struggling and you're not getting a harvest, or they're having disease, you really need to look at, what does that plant specifically require? Because we tend to just think of everything as a vegetable. And I know tomatoes are technically a fruit, but we tend to put them in the vegetable category.
Mhm.
We just
Sure.
want to plant a big vegetable garden, and we think if there's sufficient nitrogen in the soil, and it has enough sunlight, and it has enough water, that they should all just be happy and grow and be prolific. But each plant does have, yes, they all do need that, but each plant has nuances of what it actually needs. And so when a plant is struggling, we need to look at what that is and how can we mitigate in order to give that plant what it needs. So, and some of this is going to have to do with your environment. So with the tomatoes specifically, I know that we tend to have a lot of overhead rain, of course. And so I started growing them in a high tunnel, because that was the only way that I could figure out how to mitigate them not having rainfall hitting them. Now, the second thing is tomatoes actually have a pretty expansive root system. And so even in a 5-gallon bucket, it was really not enough soil and nutrients and moisture level for that plant to thrive. The other thing is, and this is where we think of tomato as being heat loving plants. And yes, they are a warm weather plant, meaning if they get beneath about 55 degrees Fahrenheit at night, they tend to go into hibernation mode and they don't really produce a whole lot. They're not going to set a lot of, their blossoms are not going to set a lot of tomatoes for you. And those tomatoes aren't going to develop and ripen. They don't like to be cold. And of course, if they get a frost, then they're toast, they're done.
Yep.
But tomatoes are kind of funny because if you get a tomato plant and it's consistently over about 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit for very many days in a row in a long period of time, the blossoms don't set into fruit. It's too hot for the plant and it knows that. And so it doesn't set it into fruit. The other thing is those fruits that have been set that are green, your green tomatoes, if you're consistently about 90 to 95 degrees or warmer for prolonged periods of time, they don't ripen. So we had a really hot summer. And that's why I am just now getting all of my tomatoes coming on, because I had a ton of green tomatoes, but they simply weren't ripening because it was too hot. So normally I would have a bigger tomato harvest starting in August. And here we are mid-September, and I'm just now hitting really the glut of my tomatoes. So what the problem with me growing them in the buckets was they were above ground in buckets, and I was keeping them on the southern exposure thinking they needed heat. I didn't realize that they were too hot. And that's why I wasn't getting very many tomatoes off of those plants. And so once I realized they do better in the ground and covering them so that they don't get the blight. And so for me, that meant moving them into a high tunnel. Now it's been, oh gosh, 12, how old are my children? 14 years. It's been 14 years. And I just told you, I'm bringing in literally laundry baskets full of ripe tomatoes from just one picking. And so giving those plants what they need, and sometimes that's creating microclimates or micro zones for them, which, you know, I've done with the tomatoes. Sometimes it's nutrients, different things like that. You're going to need to look at each plant and do a little bit of digging. But most of the time, we're just not giving that plant what it needs. Now, sometimes there's weather completely beyond your control. You know, we can't obviously control the weather, but there's things that you can do to mitigate that. I couldn't stop the overhead rain, so I put a cover over it instead. So there are things that you can do, but really just doing a deep dive evaluation. What did amazing? What didn't do so well? And so that's on the growing part, but then looking at what did we not grow enough of? Like, what am I short of? Or what did I grow way too much of? Like, we're swimming. I know we always like to pick on zucchini because zucchini is such a prolific vegetable, but did you plant way too many zucchini? Like, you're like, I have preserved this. We've eaten zucchini. I'm feeding it to the pigs and to the chickens, and we just have way too much zucchini. And yes, you can donate it, which I think is wonderful. We bring extra vegetables if we have way too many to church on Sunday. You can donate them to food banks. So there's always something that you can do with that excess, but you want to make sure that you're planting what your family is using. And if you have too much of one thing, then plan for that next year. Don't plant as many of that and see where, oh man, I thought, that this was going to be enough, green beans, but I realized I really only had enough for us to eat fresh. And I only got to can like maybe 20 pints of beans. And I really wanted to can 50 pints of beans. Well, then you know that you're going to need to, if you had enough to eat fresh and can 20 pints of beans off of what you planted, but you wanted to can 50, then you need to, almost times that by 3 in order to get that quantity for next year. So just take some time and see, where did you have too much of? Where did you not have enough of as far as what you want to eat fresh of in order to put up? So it's both, what does it meet your needs as far as filling the pantry and eating from, and then also the health of the plant, like what didn't do well, what did do well? Or this is another thing I like to look at as well is, was there a lot of excess work? Because there have been years in the garden where I felt I was weeding all the time or was having to water all the time. So is there some type of system that you can set up. You know, if you're packing a lot of water, say you're watering by hand
Mm,
by just watering can, you know, are there hoses that you can put in? And maybe it's putting in another faucet closer to the garden, or just getting some longer hoses, you know, just kind of thinking of little things like that. Like, or maybe you're taking some of the excess produce from the garden and putting it into your compost pile, but your compost pile is miles away. And so you're spending a ton of time trucking stuff to the compost pile and then the finished compost to get it to the garden. You know, so some things like that, when I first set them up, made sense. And I realize now I'm spending way too much time trying to do this. If I just moved this here or added this here, it would really shorten the amount of time or the amount of labor that we're having to do in an area. So take time to assess that too. And then like for the weeding and that's, you know, some weed management things that you actually can put in the fall that are going to help you next year not have so many weeds. And there's some things that you can do to get set up there. So it's really a total systems evaluation.
yeah.
There's a lot of parts there. But if you just sit and take some time thinking through it, you know, over the next week or two, really it's going to pay you back dividends for next year.
Yeah. I love the thoughts on, you know, what I would call economy of motion and efficiency in your systems, right? How much looking at that now. So that's something you can do to plan, and that can make the gardening experience so much, much nicer, leave you more time for planning and thinking and even doing other things while increasing your yield. If you really look at how you're moving and how your systems are working.
Yeah.
Are you a meticulous note taker? Do you write all this down and take notes, or do you
No.
just wing? Okay, good. I'm not the only one, because
No.
we're all supposed to tell everybody to take notes. And I try to take my notes. I try to write things down, try to have records. And I just don't do that great at it. So I was wondering about you.
I don't. In a perfect world, I would love to say, yes, I do. I don't. But you know, what's funny is, you know, I do a lot of videoing of the garden and teaching from the garden. And so, and you'd be like, well, that's great. I don't do video, but most of us have a smartphone, regardless how you feel about it. You have a phone with a camera, use it. So I don't take notes, but I will take pictures, and then I can go back through and look at the pictures, and they will like they'll show me if there's a disease issue, or I know like you took a picture of this for a reason. It'll kind of trigger like what is that? And so I actually use my phone as far as photo and just visual. I'm more of a visual person anyways. Yeah. And it's easier for me to take a picture than try to even open up like an app, like a note app on my phone. I know I'm not going to do that. So I'll just take a picture, and that's my trigger to then go back to that and look at those photos for planning out crop rotation, or if there was issues or just whatever it might be. So I just rely on my phone, honestly, and some photos throughout the season.
Love that. I do that a lot. I find myself going back to seeing, when was this animal born? When was, you know, and of course I'm not commercial. If you're commercial, you've got to keep records and do things a little bit differently. But as a homesteader, the photos are very, very helpful. Now, I did just realize that you can add notes to the photos, and I have thought like, I ought to, when I take that picture, just put a little note in attached to the photo so that I capture the thought. What'd be really cool is if it could do voice, wouldn't it? Because then you wouldn't have to type. You could just have your photo, give a little audio with it, and then when you go back and look at it next year, there you go. You got your notes. I don't know. That sounds like an app.
It does. So get on that, would you? I need it. Sure. In your spare time.
I get right to that. All right. Well, moving on from evaluating your garden, thinking things through well, to prepping for spring. And that's something that can start now. How do you start to think about that and start to prep for spring to get ready for next year?
Yeah. So one of the things I look at first is, are there any plants that do have disease? So if there's any plants that I think that have disease on them, I remove those from the garden. So I don't let those leaves fall. I don't let those plants fall on compost just naturally into the garden. And I don't put those leaves in my compost pile either, because I don't want that disease to spread. So for me, normally that's going to either be our potato plants and tomato plants. If there's any sign of blight, that's usually the thing that we deal with. So looking for disease first, so that you are not passing that on and not letting that stay in the soil as much as you can. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my first thing. And then second thing is again, kind of like how we said, was there any areas of the garden? Was it just a specific plant that seemed to be struggling? And then looking to see what does that, plant really need? But if it's an entire garden bed that has multiple plants planted in it and they're all struggling, then I'm going to be more suspectful that I've got some imbalances in my soil, that it wasn't just a specific plant not needing something, that there's something more overall going on. So looking at, did they just feel like they had the right light conditions, they had adequate water, but I didn't feel like they were growing or were very hardy. So for me, that's usually a sign that I'm probably a little low on nitrogen, that I might not have enough nitrogen in the soil. And sometimes there can be other things. If you have a lot of blossom end rot, it could be that you have low calcium. I have to say, honestly, in my experience, I found most blossom end rot is just inadequate watering. It's either too much watering or not enough deep watering that the calcium is in the soil. But in some cases, it can be a calcium deficiency. So if you were dealing with a ton of blossom end rot this year, on tomatoes, on zucchini, because it's not just a tomato disease, though I find they tend to be the first ones to show it. They're a little more sensitive. But take notes of that type of thing. And then I will look at if everything was growing wonderfully and I didn't have any disease issues and everything was just kind of coming on as I thought it should. I don't do a soil test every year, to be honest.
Yeah.
If I start to see that a whole bed is struggling with something, then I will do a soil test just so I can kind of see where our levels really off or imbalanced. And usually it'll let me know. I've had a few times we used to take we have a wood burning stove. That's how we heat our home. And so I wasn't thinking about it. And we were cleaning out the wood box of the wood ash, the fireplace all winter, and dumping it in a section of the garden, which can be good. Except we had put so much in this one particular area of the garden, not thinking about it, even though later in the spring we worked it in and kind of spread it out. I had really I had gotten my pH to alkaline, which is actually the higher number. But so we were up like almost an 8 on the pH scale. And that's really too high. Yeah. Not good at all.
You're out of safe range.
Yeah, you're definitely out of safe range. And so I had to bring in some elemental sulfur to get my pH level back down in the zone that the plants could actually uptake the nutrients for vegetables. And so that's where I will say sometimes a soil test is needed. It's not always needed. Usually if I see something is just really struggling across the board, then I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do a soil test. But I don't do one every year. But if you are going to do a soil test, I actually prefer to do them in the fall because some of the amendments, depending on if it's a pH level, is it, not enough of a certain macronutrient. You sometimes need months for the amendment and that to be put into the soil in order for it to be broken down enough that when the plants are put into that soil, they can actually, that those nutrients are available for them to bring up. So ideally, I prefer to do the majority of my soil amending in the fall personally. And so one of those things is obviously a soil test. And then depending upon what your soil test tells you, then you are going to probably be making some amendments to that, adding some things, et cetera, in order to get everything kind of back where it should be. But the biggest thing I do, regardless of if I'm doing a soil test or not, and even if the garden has performed really well, is making sure that I'm not leaving my garden soil bare over the winter months. And this is something that we started practicing probably about 8 or 9 years ago. This wasn't something my parents did. Like when the garden was done, Dad would just till it in for the winter and it would just be bare dirt. And the spring, same thing. We just would till it back up again and away we would go. And we grew a lot of food from that garden. But if you can cover your soil over the winter months, oh my gosh, you are going to just reap the benefits for years. One, it's going to help with your compaction. It's going to help with erosion, that soil just getting washed away that you've been working so hard to build up. And so you could do a cover crop. So you can definitely do cover crops in the garden. The one caveat I would say to doing cover crops is knowing when your frost date is, because that cover crop needs time in order to germinate and then to at least grow enough to cover the soil before you start to get your frosts. And the reason for that is not that the frost will necessarily kill the plant, but if it's not germinated and grown enough to at least cover the soil, hence it being a cover crop, and you start to get a lot of hard frosts, it just it's not going to grow anymore until spring. So you really need it to be at least at the covering age and height by the time your frosts start to hit and stay, so that it can actually cover the soil all winter. So a lot of times people want to do cover crops in fall, but they wait too long to plant
Yeah.
them for them to truly be effective. So get your timing down. And if you've missed that window, or you just aren't, cover crops aren't something you want to do right now, at least get that soil covered. So if you've got compost, I like to put compost on in the fall and in the spring. You can definitely just put your compost onto the garden soil. You could go that route. I prefer though to do really kind of like sheet mulch composting. So that's when we'll take everything out of the garden, like pull all the plants out. The plants that are healthy, then I just do a chop and drop. So we'll
Yeah.
just chop them
Leave the
and let
roots
them,
in.
yeah, leave the roots in, let the healthy leaves and everything fall. They're going to break down and feed back your soil anyway. So it's great. So do
All right.
that first. And then if I've got leaves, we'll do layer of leaves. If I'm cleaning out, now we use mobile chicken coops. So I don't really have like a chicken coop floor where I've got a lot of chicken manure, but if there's some in the roosting box areas, I'll take that out and put it on, knowing it's got all winter to break down. So not worried about it being too hot to kill anything. It's going to be completely cooled and fine by the time you get to spring planting if you put it down now. So if you're going to be adding any type of manure, I'll go ahead and put that down. We'll do leaves. We'll do some of the wood chips. You can do straw. You could do hay. Whatever you're going to do, I just put all of that down so it's covering the soil. And then I leave it for the winter. And a lot of it just breaks down. And then come springtime, just kind of pull back where your rows are going to be to plant direct sowing or to get your transplants in, the seedlings you started, etc. But then the soil is just had all winter for all those microbes to start breaking down and defeating the soil, and the earthworms coming in. And you just walk into spring, and you've mitigated your weeds because that soil's not been bare. So all of the plants that are dying this time of year that are setting those seed heads, those aren't hitting your soil, and you've covered up your soil. So what seeds were there don't have light to germinate. So if you do nothing else but that, you're going to help reduce the weeds that come back the following year.
That is, to me, one of the hugest benefits. I mean, I'm a believer in no-till for a lot of reasons, but then you get the people that say, well, I've been tilling my garden. Your parents did it, like you said, for who knows how long. They got a great garden, but I'm sure they got a lot of weeds too. And if for nothing else, the weed reduction in gardening the way you're talking about is huge. You want to talk about minimizing your efforts and getting rid of work. I've seen it go, our weed reduction is, it's 15%. There's always going to be some, but it's 15% of what it was when we regularly tilled, every year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. We, and then if you add a fresh layer in the spring after you've gotten all of your plants in for the summer garden, and then like through the walkways, you add a little bit more carbon. I mean, it's amazing how much less you have to weed.
Yeah. Really, really is. And so you're a believer in getting everything down in the winter and then letting the nutrients and letting everything kind of come to life in the spring, then having it there so that as the thaw happens, kind of the soil biology comes to life and starts to break things down and getting ready for spring in that way, it sounds like.
Yeah, I found it to be the easiest. Now, full confession, there's some years where I might not get all of the beds prepped as much as I would like.
Yeah.
And so then I'm going to be adding more, because sometimes I just don't have enough manure of our own, which sounds funny because we have this many animals, but I use a lot of the manure in the pastures for pasture management. So don't always have a lot of excess for the garden. And so if I feel like there's some beds that need a nitrogen boost, but I don't have enough manure in the fall, then I will look at putting some of that down in the spring instead, or I should say it's really late winter, really early spring for some of the beds that'll have the more warm weather plants that aren't going in until the end of May or first part of June. So in a perfect world, I do it all in fall, but in reality, there's some that happen in spring.
Yeah, likewise. What has that done for your spring as far as the workload in spring, which we all know can just be crazy?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it really takes it down because you move into these beds. They don't have a ton of weeds that have to be dealt with from the get-go. And so it's just prep. Like all I have to do is go in and take the hoe or even just my fingers, and pull back that layer and
Mhm.
just go. The soil is really loamy. It's nice and fluffy. We're just ready to go. So it does make it much easier in spring to get all of those stuff in, because I'm not doing all of that prep work beforehand like we used to have to do.
Yeah, and we can use every bit in spring, because when you have the spring explosion, it's on.
Yeah.
And every bit of saved work that we can get done now just makes that part of the season so much better and so much easier. Well, thanks, Melissa. We're going to take some questions here in a few minutes. But first, I want to share with people how they can own the summit, maybe get access to the school and join this conversation that's going to go on and continue well past the summit. If you guys have enjoyed this session, I'd like you to know that there's an opportunity that you could keep it forever, this one and all of them. And I know, while there are some of you that's making it to every single session, I don't know how you're doing that. That is amazing. You guys are so dedicated, and it's been a fun conversation. But I know for the vast majority of people, making it to every session is nearly impossible. And even getting to some of the replays, which we're getting to you every single day, is going to be challenged. So I'd love to be able to give you the summit where you could own it. You can download it. You can have these sessions to come back to and review anytime you want. And to get with it, what we're producing, something very, very cool, which is the summit guide. This is going to be 100-page-ish booklet. I can't say it's a book, but it's a booklet, a coffee table guide, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be this very, very robust guide to the summit, where we're going to capture the recipes, the tips, the tricks, the quotes, the directions that we're covering here throughout this summit, along with some stunning visuals. That's just going to be inspiring. So it's going to be this kind of coffee table library inspiring booklet with lots of great visuals and how-tos and recipes and quotes from all of our speakers, which are all instructors for the school. And we're going to print it and we're going to mail it to you. It's yours to have in hand and to keep, forever. And so really excited to be able to do that for people that sign up during the summit. Now, once the summit closes, we won't be offering this. This is just in commemoration of the summit, of our first year anniversary, and very, very exciting. So you can own the summit, you can own this guide. We're also going to throw in last year's summit, which was a very different style, where we went through a lot of the classes more, but the instructors came in and you got a lot of between the lines and a lot of commentary and a lot of discussion around the quality classes. So that's all yours free when you join the School of Traditional Skills with an annual membership. And if you join during the summit, on top of those free bonuses that you're going to own, you're going to get a huge discount. Now, I know some of you aren't familiar with the school. The school is the backbone to what we do. The summit here is where we're trying to make some training free. We're bringing our instructors in to share this training with everybody. But obviously, even as much as we're packing into the summit this week, there's only so much we can cover. So every one of the instructors here, plus a whole lot of other instructors, have a class. Melissa's class is a step-by-step class on learning exactly how to extend your garden season in the spring and in the fall, and with a lot of these strategies that we were talking about here today. And it's just one of over 20 classes where we take you step by step through a skill set to help you go from maybe totally brand new. Most of you probably, somewhere beginner, intermediate, but you're looking to fill in the gaps and to get proficient with the skill that you want to learn. And that's what we do with these classes. These are not YouTube videos. These are not blog posts. These are professionally produced classes with a very specific educational format that's not too short. It's not too long. This isn't a 60-hour master class with a lot of filler in it. This is just, let's get to the point. Let's get you the information you need, and let's help you get out there and do it. They're broken down into easy sessions, or easy lessons, so that you can come back, and instead of having to sift through an hour, if you want to come back and find a piece of information, you can go back to a 10 to 15 minute, sometimes a little bit longer lesson, and get a recap on what it is you were doing or learning. Each one of these classes also comes with a downloadable, what we call skill sheet. Skill sheet is a little bit light. We should come up with a different description, because it's a little booklet. It's a little ebook that goes with the class that you can download, you can keep, and it has the recipes, it has the guides, sometimes it has diagrams, sometimes it has places for you to take notes, keep records. Melissa and I were joking about that. We all should be better at it because it is a good thing to do. So we make sure where it's applicable that we get those to you. The school also has a place for you to take notes while you're learning. And we have over 20 classes where we're covering growing your own food. So lots of different angles on gardening, on raising your own food, from raising goats to raising dairy cows to pasture management, to raising meat birds and chickens. Justin Rhodes has got a phenomenal class. The list kind of goes on there where we're helping you on your journey, make it a bit more efficient and a bit easier to get to where you're trying to go in your homesteading journey. And let's see here. Let's see. One of our members, Sarah, said it so well. Each class is amazing. I have been so pleased with this membership. The classes are professional, informative, and everyone involved appears to truly care about teaching these skills for others to grow and learn. Thank you. And Sarah, you are welcome, and you are very, very right. We have grown a fantastic team that is passionate in sharing these skills with you. And as you can see here on the screen, if you're not familiar with the school, we have lots of other speakers, all the speakers that were here. We've got new speakers coming on and new classes coming. Adam Martin was here. We're going to be doing a class on beekeeping in October, and Brandon Sheard's releasing another class on butchering, along with Shannon Hayes in December on kitchen efficiency and how to understand the animal and prepare your meats according to how the muscles work on the animal, and that all leads into kitchen efficiency. Next spring, we've got classes on seed starting, seed saving, homestead pasture management, and it goes on. We try to produce a class every month for you, a new skill to keep you learning and building. I'm also forgetting to tell you about our classes on herbal medicine and the herbal medicine, building your herbal medicine cabinet with Dr. Patrick Jones, helping you learn how to handle first aid at home on your own, naturally when possible. But he's also going to let you know, hey, when you need to go ahead and step out and head to the doctor. Don't do this on home. Same with medicinal herbs for colds and flus. That's there for you. And all of these we're going to continue to grow and develop in the school to help you keep growing in your journey and developing resources that help you build health, freedom, and security. Now, that's just the classes. What is just as powerful and worthwhile and beneficial is the online community. We have a members-only online community for folks that are part of the school where you can take the classes and then you can come together and you can learn together and you can share together. We all know that community is a challenge for those of us that are embracing this lifestyle. There's often not a lot of people around us. Yes, you've got Facebook, you've got YouTube, you've got some of these places, but it's not a tight-knit community of just like-minded people where you can really hone in and talk about the things that you're learning and doing. And so we have created a community where you can engage with each other. You can talk about the classes. You can talk about what's going on your own property. You can share photos. You're going to be able to, hopefully by the end of the year, we're working on the development side so that you can share videos. So you can be out in the garden and talk and say, hey, look at this. Look what I got going on with my tomatoes. Has anybody seen this? And here's where I'm at. And you can share those stories and problem solve together besides taking the classes. And you can also celebrate together. And eventually, for those that are interested in the community, we're going to make it so that you can help find each other if you want to, because while the online community is great, we want to always be encouraging you guys to develop community locally. And so it's going to become a hub to take it from digital to local, because it can be very hard to find each other. Sometimes people are close, they're within an area, but you have no way to connect. This is going to help you do that. We also take you through learning together, not just in the classes, but in what we call community challenges. This summer, we did a compost challenge where the members went through together and built compost piles and shared their wins, shared what they were learning, shared, all the tips and tricks, and they did it together. It was very, very powerful. This fall, I believe it begins in October, we're going to work on filling your herbal medicine cabinet. You're going to go through together as a community and learn to make some natural medicine for colds and flus and fill your herbal medicine cabinet. You guys, I could go on and on about how powerful this community is. And we're offering it to you right now during the summit, all of this where you can own the summit. We're going to send you the book. You're going to get access to all the classes. to the community, all the future classes for a year. So that should be another 12, 10 to 12, maybe a few more. I don't know, but 12's a goal, one a month. You can have access and own all of that, plus 33% off of the regular price. So that is a huge, huge deal. I'd love for you to consider. You can click the link below. I want to share a few things that some of our members have said during the summit. If you're here and a member and you want to chime into the chat right now, please let folks know how it's gone for you the last several months or year, however long you've been here. But I want to share some of these stories. Jen says, the summit is great, but honestly, it's nothing compared to the classes. And that is absolutely the truth. This is just a taste of what the school has for you. Tammy says, I joined after last year's summit with the intention to quit within 30 days because I really couldn't afford it. The information and community available was so good for me that I never quit. Tammy, it's great to still have you here. And Tammy says, now I'm planning into budget to upgrade to lifetime membership as soon as I can. That is so, so awesome. And, you know, I was really touched by John's comment, who says, I'm really loving the classes. They are so well made and such high quality. And I love that each session is only 10 to 20 minutes. So I never feel overwhelmed. You guys, that's what I was referencing earlier. This is very specifically designed education to fit into your life, to help make this doable in the middle of your busy life, so that you still move forward implementing skills, these homesteading skills, these traditional skills into your life. Because we know you still have a lot of other things to do, and it's challenging to put it all together. And when you get to doing this, you don't have time to sift through hours of video. You need to go find out about a skill, learn the things you learn, go do it, come back, maybe get a recap, maybe find something you missed and get back out there and get proficient. And we've been very, very intentional. As I was telling you yesterday, for those of you that have been following Homesteading Family for a while, and Carolyn is a fantastic educator in sharing knowledge in a way that's relatable but doable. And she laid the groundwork, the backbone to this education system to make this work really, really well. And, you know, $195, you guys, that's a trip to the grocery store. And it's not that much. Summits like this cost that. Without, just to get the downloads, they can cost that. Without the booklet, without access to the school, without access to the community. And I promise you, you will make that back as a part of this community, as a part of this school in the year, probably tenfold, in the skills that you will learn and the things that you will learn to do to get healthy, nutritious food on your table for your family, and probably a surplus and abundance to share with others. I'm so confident in that we give you a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can get in there. You've got 30 days to take all the classes you want to take, check out the community. You can download every single download that's in there if you want. And then if 30 days, it's not worth it to you, we'll give you your money back. Not going to ask you, not going to bug you. We'll just give it back and say, okay, within that first 30 days. I'm so confident that this is a place for you, that you're going to find not only a place to learn skills, only a place to build your homesteading life, but a community to do it together with. So I want you to go check that out. We're going to get ready to take some questions here and do a couple more giveaways. But go ahead and click the link below. It will open up another page so you can look to see if that's right for you. And hey, if the annual is not right, we do have a monthly. It costs a little more on a 12-month basis when you do the monthly, but you can get to the school with the monthly. We just won't have the downloads in the book available for you to own. You'll still have access to them. You can still check them out. You just won't be able to own those. But that is a viable path if you want to do that to get started. And you can always upgrade within the same plan. We won't change the price on you. So you come in with the monthly, few months, you're like, whoa, this is for me. I want to do the annual. You can still get the same annual pricing if you come in on the monthly now. So go check that out. Let's do a giveaway and then get some questions to Melissa. Let's see here. Let me get to my notes. Going to give away a Homestead Living magazine. I'm honestly not sure if that's a subscription or one of the magazines, but we're going to give one of those away to you. Our moderators can let you know, and we're going to give that to Tina Dixon. Tina Dixon, you have won the Homestead Living magazine. Check that out. That is a fantastic magazine. Make sure and email in at hello at schooloftraditionalskills.com, and we will get that sent out to you. All right. Melissa's still here with us? There she is. Hey there. All right. Thanks for hanging out and letting me rattle on for a minute. Ready for some questions?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Carl, I'm just going to take them from the top here. What is the average amount of tomato plants you plant in 1 year for your family?
Great question, Carl. So for us, I do about 24 paste tomato plants for all of my preserving. So we do grow some cherry tomatoes just for fun eating, but I'm not going to try to sauce from those. So about 24 paste tomato plants.
Cool. All right. Deanna asks, how far from the garden should your compost pile be?
Great question. I have mine about, well, we actually have 2 piles right now. Mine's like 10 feet from the one bed. Yeah.
Wouldn't you want it as close as possible?
Yeah. Well, so that I can get the wheelbarrow and tractor in between.
Right. Yeah. You got to have.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's close. And I also want it close to my hose, like, cause I'm having to keep that moisture in there during the summer months because I don't have enough rainfall to keep it moist. So yeah, as close to all of my resources as possible.
Cool. SG wants to know, how do you handle snow and wind here? SG is about 2 hours south of you. How do you handle snow and wind in the late winter and early spring when it comes to getting tomatoes? I assume started. You're not growing tomatoes much in early spring and winter, but how do you handle that to get them out there and get going?
Yeah. You are seed starting those indoors. There's tomatoes will not grow or live in any type of snow environment, or really soil temps, not just the outside temps even. But if your soil temps are down, even if you didn't have, say you were hanging around 40 degrees, that's not freezing, obviously. But your tomatoes wouldn't grow in that either. It's just too cold. So seed starting indoors is the only way that you're going to be able to start your tomatoes in order to get them in. And then I don't plant my tomatoes out until usually in May. Now, depending on the spring, sometimes I can put them out in early May, but a lot of years I can't even put them out until about Memorial weekend because it's just too damp and chilly for them.
Right. Okay. Noella asks, do you recommend covering diatomaceous earth over the entire garden to get rid of squash bugs, cucumber beetles? Does that work? Have you done that?
No, because we have too much moisture. And so if you are covering your entire, and I have too many garden beds, I can't even imagine, that would be a lot. But as soon as you have moisture, so if you have a heavy dew or you have a sprinkler on or any rain, then that becomes ineffective at actually cutting the exoskeleton of those types of insects. And it's just going to be a waste of time.
So do you use it much in a certain way? Do you ever use that, or is that just not something you do?
I will use food grade DE in certain instances, but very sparingly. One, because we do have so much rainfall here that I rarely, except in the middle of summer, actually have a time where I can use it that it is effective. And so I just rarely use it, but there are some small occasions. We had, for example, in the high tunnel where the tomatoes are, where I don't have overhead rain issues, so it would be effective. I had a flea beetle infestation and it was eating all of my little baby tomato plants up. And so I did use that inside there on the tomatoes once, in order to get rid of the flea beetles so that they weren't skeletalizing everything on the tomatoes so that they would actually make it. So I do use it. I just, for our environment, because we are so wet, it's not something that I can take advantage of very often. And I do try to be, even with organic and natural methods of pest control, bees are still going to be affected by food grade DE. So if you are using it, making sure you're not putting it on blossoms where bees would land. And so I just try to use it as sparingly as possible.
Good thought, thinking about the beneficials. Yeah, I like that. Now, I've not heard about this one. Maybe you have. Rachel is asking if you've heard about or used cinnamon in your garden for disease control. That's a new one to me.
Yeah, I've heard of using cinnamon against fungal diseases is my understanding of where and when it could be effective. But honestly, like I buy organic Ceylon cinnamon, and even in bulk, it's still not super cheap. And so I am not using cinnamon out in the garden. It's just our garden spaces are too big. So if I'm looking at fungal disease, is pruning management, pruning some of the bigger leaves back, my plant spacing, growing vertical. If it's for powdery or downy mildew, you can use baking soda, which is way cheaper, and is very effective. Make a baking soda spray. You can do a whey or a milk spray. You could also do copper, which is organic, natural method. You could do a copper spray, which I can then do foliar. It's going to be much more effective if you're looking at it as a fungal application, which is the only way I have heard of it being used. So if it's for something else in fungal, those are things for fungal diseases.
Yeah. I'm with you. The cinnamon's a bit expensive, so probably keep that in the kitchen. Find something else. Ray is asking, are pine needles good to use as mulch? What's your opinion and take on that?
Yeah, if you've got pine needles or like the pine straw, we don't really have those types of trees. We here on my side of the mountains, we don't have the pine straw, but yeah, absolutely. Whatever you have available to you naturally is what I would look at using first.
Yeah. Kim's asking how you deal with blight situations.
I put them under a tarp. No. That's why I grow the majority of my tomatoes, honestly, in a high tunnel, is because it usually is from rain. So if you aren't having a lot of rain, but you're battling with blight, but you're using an overhead sprinkler, then stop that. Basically, the best way to deal with blight is to prevent it, because especially with late blight, once it's hit, you're not going to save it. I mean, there's no saving the crop. Like, it's just done. So if you can prevent it in the beginning is really your key. So one, if you know blight is in your area, it's something that you've been dealing with, is you need to crop rotate. So don't plant tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, or eggplants, because those are all in the nightshade family. They're all susceptible to blight. Don't plant them in the same spot every single year. If you can at least get a 3-year rotation, so you would have tomatoes here 1 year, the next year do summer squash, the next year do a root crop. You see where I'm going with that?
Right.
That's going to help break up that life cycle of it to begin with. And then your second thing is no overhead moisture if possible. So don't use overhead sprinklers. If you're getting a lot of rain, then if you can put up, I've even done, if you don't have a high tunnel, where you just take one of the large cattle panels, those 18-foot cattle panels, create an archway over top of them. And then I just will put plastic on that to keep the rain off of the ones in the main vegetable garden. It's not going to provide any type of heat because you've got all the airflow that's going under them, but it can keep the rain off of the majority of them. And so that's how we grow tomatoes down at the farm stay, where I don't have a high tunnel. And then if it's really hot and sunny for the whole rest of the summer, it's really easy to just pull that plastic off, and then you're just growing them as is.
Yeah. Good. Connie says, should I use manure if I don't know if the animal ate hay that was sprayed?
If you're getting the manure, I'm assuming that is it not coming from the farmer, that you could ask them what type of hay the animals were fed? Honestly, I use the manure all from our own animals, and I know they've not been fed hay that's been sprayed. So I don't have any hands-on knowledge of knowing how much of that is passed through the manure, how much would it affect your crops, etc. I would say if you've got some already, or you're not sure, but it's the only that you have, is mix some in with the soil and just do a test of like a bean or a tomato plant, because those are very sensitive. So if there is any of that herbicide in there, you will see it affect that plant very quickly, and then you'll know that you wouldn't want to put it in all of your beds.
You could probably.
I don't know if you have any experience, Josh.
Yeah, well, you definitely got to be careful, because if there's any broadleaf herbicide in there, then you're toast, and you don't want that mixed in your general garden soil. So I'm with you. Do a little tester if you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, straw, they would use broadleaf herbicide, but I don't know with hay. I don't know. I don't know.
That they do. They definitely. Oh yeah, they definitely use broadleaf herbicide with alfalfas and different hays, grass hays. They definitely do. There's different ones, And they definitely do, and it's survivable through the rumen of the horse and the cow, or the cow, not the
Right. It's
horse,
not broke down. It's
but
passed
it's
through.
survivable.
Yeah.
It doesn't break down. And we had a guy here that
Mhm.
used to produce some great compost. He was a hay farmer and cattle guy, and he quit because the nature of his leases changed, and he had to start spraying to, instead of doing rotation stuff he'd historically done. And, from his perspective, whatever it was, he had to start spraying. But thankfully, he was conscientious enough to say, I'm not going to sell this to gardeners anymore because I know that the broadleaf herbicide is going to come through. And so you definitely have to be careful. And I think, it's a hard thing to like go get some chemical test for. So what you're saying, Melissa, do a little test plot, do a little thing. And you can do that off season. You can do it in a little bucket or milk jug in your house and do some starts in it, some beans, peas, tomatoes, and that'll tell you if you've got a problem or not. So I think exactly what you're saying is the way to go there. Let's see here, Danielle. Wait, no, I want to go back to Isla here. This is a good one. We'll try to flesh out that can be very challenging. At least I found this challenging. Melissa, if you plan to have a fall winter garden, when do you prep that garden for spring? Can't be in the fall, right? Because you're growing something in it. I think this is a very relative question for the home scale gardeners. And this is cover crops, rotations, planting when you're trying to extend the season, and what beds, and you got to get stuff done before frosts in the fall. And so how do you handle that? It's a very good question that people wrestle with when they start trying to apply these principles.
Yeah, it is a really good question. So for doing the fall garden crops, because I have some fall garden crops in already, is you can still cover crop if you want, but you're obviously going to be pulling back the mulch if you've already got it there, and just trying not to seed super up close to those existing crops. But I have had, cabbage and Brussels sprouts in the garden, and I've went ahead and just sown our cover crops around them, because the cover crops, they take weeks to germinate. They're not really stealing that much nutrient from these already fall garden crops, etc. So you can do that, but it's not like you're going to be able to really, it's going to take a little bit more work because you're working around plants that are already there. So if cover crop isn't the way that you want to do it, depending on how densely planted with your fall garden crops you are, it might just not be very conducive. So the other thing though is mulch. I mean, those plants that are growing in the fall are only going to benefit from having mulch around them anyhow. And so I would still go ahead and put in, maybe not the fresh chicken poop, because that would be too hot of nitrogen for the roots there of the crops that you're growing. So maybe you wouldn't put in the manure, but you definitely could still compost. And then you can still do a top dressing of all of the different mulch things that we've already talked about as far as your carbon layer. That is not going to harm those plants that are growing. If anything, it's going to help insulate their roots and keep that soil warmer so that they will actually grow longer for you into the fall as the cold weather starts to come in.
Yeah, very good. Let's see. I want to take an STS thought here. Somebody was talking about the 195 not being able to do it right now. I want to remind you guys that you can come in for the monthly at 19. And if you want to upgrade to the 195 later, you can do that. But if you don't take advantage of that now, you won't be able to get that annual price. So just another way for you to get in. I know budgets are tight sometimes, and I'm just going to encourage you. And we've got so many testimonials this week of people that just did that. They came in last year, not really thinking they could afford it, but they saved so much money from what they learned that now it's become part of the budget so that they can continue to learn and grow. So I want to encourage you to take advantage of that. Let's see. Do you have slugs? Is slugs something you deal with in your area?
Oh, baby, yes.
Okay, good. Well, then this will be a good question for you from Chris. How do you deal with them? This seems to be Chris's biggest pest in the garden. What's your strategies?
Yes, slugs are a huge pest. In fact, when I shared on YouTube what our slugs look like, people like they're normal slug size here, and people are like, "Are those dinosaur slugs?" I've never seen slugs that big. So yes, we're kind of the slug capital, I think. So you've got a couple of different options for dealing with slugs. I have tried doing row covers where I've had my row covers pinned to the soil as tight as possible. It can help, but I still have found slug slime trails where the little boogers have managed to find their way in. So I can't say that is fail proof, but it can help mitigate. really is doing beer traps. So you just take a shallow dish and pour the cheapest beer you can find and pour some of that beer in shallow enough. They're attracted to it and they come in. Depending on how shallow your little bowl is or whatever container you're using. I've even taken like a little piece of wood to make a ramp so that the slugs can surely get into the beer, and they go in there and they drown and it just kills them. So that they're very much attracted to, and so that can help clear out and keep them in going into that instead of going and eating your plants. Every couple of days, you're going to have to be emptying it out and putting fresh beer in. So there is kind of a maintenance mode there. But that has worked really well as far as killing them and bringing them in off of the plants that they like to munch on so much. Demectus earth doesn't work for me because slugs come out when it's wet, and then the DE is not, it's no longer effective. I have not found crushed eggshells work at all for slugs. My slugs just crawl right over them. They could care less about that. It doesn't scratch them, the eggshells. So that has never worked for me. Really, truly, the best thing is ducks. My chickens do not eat slugs. I don't know about yours, Josh, but my chickens won't touch a slug. But the ducks love slugs, and the ducks are not destructive to the garden in the same manner that the chickens are. So I can open up and let the ducks go through the garden for a few hours, and they just go in. Their feet are webbed, so they don't scratch the roots up as much. They don't do as much damage to the vegetables or the plants, but they'll go through, do a slug patrol run, and then just come right back out. And so we got ducks 2 years ago, and I'm like, why did nobody tell me ducks would take care of my slug problem? I would have had ducks from the get-go. So if you really want to get rid of slugs, get a couple of ducks, and then you're going to get eggs as a side benefit. So it works out well. But aside from the ducks, it really is that beer trap has been the most effective for us.
Awesome. Let's see here. I'm going to do a giveaway, and then we'll take a couple more questions before we've got to wrap it up. And hey, get to give away something right here of Melissa's, the family garden book, your family garden plan book, and 2 tickets to the Modern Homesteading Conference. And if you guys didn't catch this earlier, Melissa is the founder. Would that be the right way to say that, Melissa? Founder.
Yeah, co-founder with Katie.
Co-founder with Katie of the Modern Homesteading Conference. So glad that Melissa put that together. And so we're giving you guys a pair of tickets. Melissa, cool story. Somebody that won in the last day or two was local here. They were so wanting to go, having a hard time affording it. If I'm remembering the story right, just found out he was sick with something fairly severe, lymphoma. Oh, and man. They weren't going to be able to go, and they just happened to get picked. We had no idea. We actually have software here that's randomly picking, and they won, and it was an answer to prayer. It was really, really cool.
Oh, so, that's amazing. Oh, you're going to make it teary-eyed.
Oh, yeah. So neat. Just loved hearing that story. So anyways, let's see. Somebody here is going to win Melissa's book and a pair of tickets to the conference next summer, and looking for a name. All right. Holly James. Holly James, you have won Melissa's book and those 2 tickets to the Modern Homesteading Conference. Please email us at hello@schooloftraditionalskills.com. And Mariah or one of the ladies here will make sure we get you all set up. Okay, I've got 2 more questions. And you guys, there's a lot of questions. We can't get to them all here. It's limited time. The school and the community is the place where this keeps going, where you can keep the conversation going. A lot of the questions that I'm seeing are in Melissa's class in detail. She takes you through it. So Melissa's class alone is worth the price. Owning the summit alone is worth the price. And yet you're getting all of it. So go pick up the conversation there. Go pick up the skills there. Check that out while we wrap up here. Tammy asks, which soil test, when you do a soil test, what do you use?
Yeah, great question, Tammy. So I have used 2. I've used simplesoiltesting.com. They're locally in my area, so I can just drop my sample off to them.
That's nice.
Yeah, which is very nice. Our county extension offices in my state and county do not offer soil testing. Now, if you're in the US, a lot of county extension offices do offer soil testing. So check with them as a resource. If they don't offer it, like mine does not offer it.
Excuse me.
Redmond's soil test is the ones that I have been using for the past year and a half since they came out with them.
It's
I think it's
that
been about,
long.
yeah. So I've been using those for the past year and a half, just because I can mail them in and then I get my results right online. So it's worked out really well.
Yeah, the Redmond test is great. It's a basic test, but it's actually really nice for a lot of people because it helps interpret. It's simple. Your big soil test, right? It takes some work to get through it and understand it. And the Redmond team has really boiled that down, and they made it really easy, like you're saying, Melissa. You just put it in a little dish, put it in the package, and send it off. And you even can have a place where it keeps records of it. I really like that.
Yeah.
And of course, Redmond's a sponsor. I love the Redmond product. So I don't know if the discount they're offering this week applies to their soil test, but it's worth looking and seeing because it's a good baseline. All right. One more question here from Kelsey, and this is kind of about buying property. We have a hayfield surrounding our little lot, and part of it, right adjacent to our land, is for sale. We'd love to buy it, but they do spray the hayfield. I don't know exactly what with. I assume probably a broadleaf. That would be a normal assumption. How long would we need to wait before we could use the land for garden, berry bushes, fruit trees, pasturing ruminants, etc.? Homesteading in general is what she's saying.
Yeah. Well, good for you for being cognizant of looking at what has been on that land already before buying it. So good job with that. So organic certification is the land can't be sprayed or have any synthetic inputs on it, herbicides, pesticides, etc., for a minimum of 3 years. So I would say 3 years, really, if you're looking for it to clear, at least to meet what would be an organic certification. As far as doing it faster, I mean, there are, some different types of crops that you could put on there that can kind of help. Like potatoes are very absorbent and they grow underneath the ground. So you could try planting some potatoes there. I wouldn't want to eat them, however, but there are some different things that you can grow to help kind of soak that stuff up out of the soil faster. But general rule of thumb for organic certification is 3 years. So I would probably be looking at 3 years before I would be comfortable consuming anything that was grown on there. The other thing you're going to want to consider, though, is drift. So if the hayfield, are you able to buy the whole hayfield, I guess is what I'm saying, or is it part of it and it's still adjacent to a hayfield that's being sprayed? Because if it's elevation down, right, you could have runoff, and you also can have drift. So if you're not able to buy the entire field, but it's just part of it and there's still spray there, like that's just something you need to be cognizant and aware of, that it could be, parts of it could continue to be contaminated depending on drift and or the elevation and way that the runoff would happen from a field that's still being sprayed that butts up next to it.
Yeah, good thoughts. There's some strategies you can apply to mitigate that, redirect water, do different things, but those are all just great considerations into buying land. But how cool that you've got land adjacent to you that you may be able to expand upon.
Yeah.
And man, if that's affordable and you're staying put, I'd be getting after it, trying to figure that out for sure.
Yeah. There's always a way you can to your point, there's always a way that you can make it work, but it may take some time.
Yeah, it may take some time. Yeah. There's a lot of reparative strategies, a lot of things you can plant. There's a lot of things you can do to make that land worthwhile. We had that issue on our property. It wasn't a commercial field, but the previous owner was doing all kinds of stuff, and we've had to deal with that, and it's been okay. So we're out of time. Melissa, thanks so much for hanging out with us today and sharing your wisdom and knowledge and a few good laughs. Just appreciate you a whole bunch. And thank you, everybody else. Look for the next session today with Nicholas Bertner from the School of Permaculture, where we're going to be talking about systems for your homestead. Looking forward to that. And have a great day, everybody. Hope to see you in the next lessons and hope to see you in the school and in the community. Take care. See you soon.